So I have always loved writing and poetry. I think um, it was instilled in me because my mother would always make us write every day. My brother didn't really stick to it, but I really loved it. I think I was the more of the English person. So I did a lot of the reading, the writing. So I think in terms of when I really was able to fall in love with it, I think it kind of went hand in hand, the reading and eventually the poetry, and then eventually my own writing. More so in middle school. So in middle school, I was able to read everything I could get my hands on in the library. The librarian knew me very well because I would go in there every day and she would give me discarded textbooks. So I would read a lot of the English discarded textbooks, especially. And so when I would read them, I remember distinctly there was one book in particular that had a section on poetry. And so I read through it, and there was this really intriguing poet called Alfred Noyes, and he had a poem called The Highwayman, and that really stuck to me as a young kid, being able to see how people were able to create a whole story and a whole new world in such a fashion. So I kind of wanted to try my own hand at it. And so I started developing a creative writing club at that time. And that's kind of how I was able to combine both of them and fell into it. So that's really what it kind of took off and it really started. I am obsessed with poetry for so many reasons. I think it's just such, for me, it's almost because I'm a performer, it's a way to um, engage in that type of performativity without having anybody there. So, like I was mentioning earlier, this concept of world building, you're able to do so without having to write a whole novel, right? Not to discredit any novels, like Octavia Butler is a genius at that, but you're able to do so much with so little, and so that kind of pressures you to be as creative as possible. And you're able to really allow the reader to have the material that you offer them, and then they can run with it. You know, they can use that information what they will and come to their own conclusions almost. So poetry is really able to do that, and I think it's one of the most challenging performing acts, really. I used to do open mics quite a bit before, of course, COVID hit. And you kind of have to really be able to engage in your own material in different ways and allow there to be breathing room and understand the cadence of your audience and seeing how they react and the way that they're able to absorb your words. So I think that's one of the really crucial reasons why poetry is so important to me, is because you're able to write something that could be the most painful part of your life, the most joyful part of your life, the most fearful part of your life, and really write it all down without any censorship, and then allow yourself to have some breathing room and in a way heal from whatever it is that you're working on with yourself too. So that's why poetry is so important. There's so many poets and so many poems, like I mentioned in particular, that were really important to me. So like Alfred Noyes, The Highwayman, was one of the first ones that really were able to influence me in that way. Of course, I studied Edgar Allan Poe for some time, and so being able to read not just his most popular poems, but also his short stories, and really kind of getting able to engage in who he was as a person, and also, why he was able to write at certain points in his life what he wrote. I really am invested right now in Jessica Starr. She's a really fabulous Salvadorian poet. She's, again, very uncensored, very raw, has great Instagram live events, and is able to just really talk about what it's like being, a fat Salvadorian female poet. There's also Yosimar Reyes. He is a queer undocumented poet who also talks about his experiences. And these two really have wonderful dynamics in the way that they're able to really engage in these type of conversations, whether it be, I've attended several events where they are speakers there and they kind of just have conversations with the audience or with other poets that they invite. And so to be able to see them doing that in such a way is, and they're both really big now, they're really big names, so they're really, really important. Other poets that I can think of off the top of my head, it's kind of hard. John Keats, too, is a romantic poet who really influenced me in kind of engaging in nature and being able to write more about that. And of course, with his own tragic occurrences, being able to write those onto the paper. So those are just a few I can think off the top of my head that have really influenced me. Well, my poem ideas, some of them come from people, some of them come from different parts of my life, some come from just observations that I see. Sometimes they're based on random strangers, sometimes they're based on people I know, sometimes they're based on myself. And so my writing method really depends on that. It depends on what am I feeling that day. Sometimes I just write things down. Most of my poems are just me writing them down in one shot. I don't really take too much time to meditate on it because I'll be too fixated on the technical writing aspect of whatever it is I'm writing. So sometimes I'll catch either grammatical error, or sometimes they put the wrong word in, or if I read it out loud, I'll catch myself saying a different word that my mind was trying to go to, and so I'll change it. But generally, when I'm actually doing the writing, I just write it down, and I try to engage with it later. And so typically, I just go for it. And if there are any issues with it, later on, I'll be able to kind of walk away from it and then come back to it and decide what I want to do with it, whether I want to change it or not. But really, it's just me, whatever I'm feeling or whatever I'm thinking at that point, I'll just go ahead and write it down. So my poetry can be a form of therapy for myself and for others in a multitude of ways. Like I mentioned earlier, when I write it, I just write it out. So there is that stream of consciousness that I have where I put myself within, I've learned positive parameters for myself of how far I can jump into that rabbit hole of emotions. And so I kind of engage in that and I get into it. And so for me, I'm able to kind of get all this gunk out that sometimes I'm not always able to express. And luckily I have a great support system with lots of friends where I can relay these thoughts to, but putting it into my own words and kind of sending it out is one way for me to be able to get all of those feelings out of myself, and to be able to do it in a way where other people could engage or maybe understand or have a conversation with me about. And so in that way, conversations start. So I can give an example. I think this was a little before Breath of Fire. There was a Southern California women's celebration event, I believe is something along the lines of that. And so I was running a poetry panel and I wrote a poem all about abuse. And from that one poem, we had a really beautiful conversation with all these, especially the women in the audience, who were able to engage with it and kind of were making these realizations that they probably hadn't had before. And from that poem, so every line of the poem was every letter of the alphabet. And so they were kind of listening, kind of engaging in that way. And so for them, it's also therapeutic because they also get to engage in those memories within positive parameters and have those conversations that they might not have had before, might not have had discoveries before. So I think it's really important to be engaging with your audience and recognize that they too will start to have relations with whatever words you're giving to them. And so being able to talk these things out and having times where they make these discoveries is necessary. So I am a storyteller from my own past and what I have experienced, and being able to get my issues and my anxieties and my fears out, and then being able to put that out and having a fruitful conversation where I get to engage with people who are trying to do the same thing or may not have planned to do the same thing but feel like they want to share is really therapeutic for everybody involved. So it's really nice to be able to engage in that way and be a provider in that sense. I have a pretty and I hope this is true for the other members, but I have a unique pathway to engaging with Breath of Fire. So there was an event, I think it was a 24-hour theater event that was going on in Orange County. And I knew Diana Bourbon because of the person who I was with at the time worked with her and was also in theater. And she made a post on Facebook saying that they needed an actress for a particular part of a new play. And so I figured, why not? Sounds pretty similar to my personality and who I am anyway. And it was just a really brief reading. So I had worked up until that point in tech. So behind the scenes of theater, all the magic that happens, the sets that move, the lights that go on, the telling people to get on stage, that was all that I was doing, really. But I figured I might as well try my hand at it. And I was very lucky to be able to do that. And we got into the rehearsal space, and I was able to meet several other members of Breath of Fire who had been working with them for quite some time. And it was really wonderful because it didn't feel like a hostile environment. It didn't feel like there were any egos involved, which is kind of the previous experience that I had, and was one of the reasons why I've now moved almost solely to Breath of Fire and being involved with them. So when I was able to do that rehearsal and then 2 days later do the actual read-through, one of the co-founders, Sara Guerrero, was in the audience and was watching everything and was going to start directing Real Women Have Curves. And she had pretty much every character ready to go that was already kind of cast, and was kind of bringing people in to see if there were any changes that she wanted. But there was one character in particular that she still needed to cast. And so when I did the reading, it was kind of my way of auditioning. I didn't even really audition. And so she saw me and said, come in for, a read-through with the other cast members, and kind of gave me a mini audition. And so I went in and I got the part. And from there, I kind of was able to really engage with what they were doing. And it was been very fruitful and very, lots of hard work, lots of dedication, but very, very rewarding and very close to my heart because, like I said, no egos involved. It's just about producing really good art that's meaningful and can really be a fruitful discussion for whoever leaves any part of our pieces. So that's kind of how I got involved with Breath of Fire, and I'm still happy to be involved with them. So I wanted to be involved with this event because I haven't been able to do a lot of poetry readings lately because of COVID. And I've just been attending a lot of online events and performances that have been really fun. And I figured, well, this is a really fun, safe space. There are a lot of great people who come to these events. And I just wanted to share more of what I had besides just my acting with the audience. So, and of course, to hear everyone else's work too, and hear what they're working on as well. That's one of the main reasons why I wanted to jump back in. The lineup for my poetry for this event is going to start with a poem called Queer, Vida Obscura Queer. It's just kind of a timeline almost of the relationships that I had been in relation to cars. So each person that I had been involved with drove a particular car that reminds me of them, and memories that are triggered by those particular cars, and just being able to understand my path towards my queerness and who I am as a queer individual, and being able to kind of recall what that was like. That's kind of what the first piece is for, is just being able to provide like a timeline of what my relationships kind of were like, and those memories that get brought up from those memories. So my second piece is called Bad Girls in Black. That is a dedicated poem to all of the wonderful mujeres and women with an X, who are really can seem intimidating at first, but are really heartfelt. I did a lot of organizing as an undergrad, and a lot of organizing now as a graduate student too, where I engaged with a lot of people who were in the alternative world and the underground. And for a lot of people who are outside of those sort of hubs of lifestyles, it could seem intimidating and bizarre, especially for women who are, look different or behave unladylike, whatever that might be. I wanted to dedicate this poem to them so that people could understand where they were coming from and why there's these forms of trauma that might prevent them from seeming nice and warm and ladylike, but really they're trying to protect themselves and the ones that they love. They're very, very dedicated, but because of the hardships that they had to endure, it's hard to let anyone outside of maybe who they're comfortable being with in. And also it's just because, I was a little punk kid. I'm still a punk kid at heart. And so I went to a lot of shows and did a lot of underground type of stuff. And so it kind of is dedicated to that part of my life too, and being able to be involved with those kind of hubs of performances and the type of underground that some artists have considered to be, to the wayside because it's not high art, but that's the kind of art that I love, and that's why I wanted to give them the light of day that they deserve. My final piece is called Bloom. So if you look at, for my portion of this event, if you look in the background, that's actually a highway where there's a lot of car accidents. And so 6 years ago, I was actually in a really bad car accident on that road. So I was not driving, but the driver kind of lost control and we flipped twice. And so went through really, really intense physical therapy, had to kind of learn how to walk again and do basic things again and, sit upright and all of these elements. And so because of my fear during the accident itself, I actually clutched onto my car seat. And so I think instinctually, just every once in a while, I'll do that again. And that's what this poem is about, is just, again, this concept of memory and remembering what I was thinking during that time. And then because I have PTSD, going from that moment back into where I am in the current time and recognizing that I do this. A lot of people, most people, if not everyone, have no idea that I do that, but it's just something that I do. And all those memories that I lay out in this poem kind of hit me at once. And then towards the end, as I'll read, I kind of come back to reality and kind of come back to the time that I'm actually in. And I have to kind of create this mantra to remind myself that I'm not at that point. So that's the 3 poems that I'll be reading for this event. I think with any poetry reading that I do, but I think especially now because it's virtual, I really want the audience to reflect. I think now that we're kind of isolated and going through extreme pressures of anxiety and uncertainty, we are kind of starting to unravel on an individualistic, nationalistic, and internationalistic level, so much so that we have no choice but to look inward. And I think being able to bring up these hard memories that I have had and showing ways where we can do it in a positive manner, in an artistic manner, and in a manner where we can have safe spaces and have those type of conversations is really what I'm trying to get at, and really something that I would like the audience to have and to know that they can be progressive in the way that they reach out to other people, to know that when they go through maybe through harsh memories that I'm not exactly like mine, but when they're engaging in their own traumatic experience, to know that it's okay to reach out, that it's okay to have days where you just have to shut yourself off, where there will be days where you will reflect and things could feel overwhelming, whether it's based on the past or everything that's going on in the present or both, that there are people that they know or outside sources that they can engage in and have ways to take care of themselves. So I think what I also want them to know is that, there are other forms of therapeutic methods besides just traditional westernized therapy. There's so much available, and I really want them to have that type of thinking and know that they're not entirely by themselves, and there are people out there and resources out there that are available to them to help them out. I'm so looking forward when I attend. When I'm not performing, I'm looking forward to hearing what everyone else is working on. I'm always excited to see the lineup of people who I've known and people who are new. It's always exciting to hear something new and learn something new and to engage in fruitful conversations. I have a really good friend of mine, Melanie, who was with me during my undergrad, who also worked in theater, and we kind of worked together on the Latinx play project. And she's doing a piece at the very end, so I'm really excited to see how she's grown and see, her piece. But everyone else too, it's always nice to have a pleasant surprise at these events and hear what everyone else is working on and make new friends and see some old ones. I think the SoCal community and the theater community should be attending Breath of Fire events because they're raw, true events. I have worked in theater circles where it's very safe, where we do, Sound of Music, we do Sondheim, we do the same with the same actors, and it's not engaging in a realistic conversation. It's more so a packaged Mickey Mouse theater that's set solely to entertain you, but not necessarily to have you engage in the material and to really make you think after you leave. So for me, that's one of the reasons why I stick with Breath of Fire, is because I'm always learning. There's aspects of social justice that are invested in anything that we do. We are really a family. We're a familia. We are very close to one another and really honest with one another, where we don't want to let our egos get involved. We can, go hang out afterwards and not feel like we have to prove anything to each other because we understand each other. And we're very invested in pushing an agenda forward that is towards positivity and towards social justice, and being able to bring up those type of stories, those type of voices that for a lot of mainstream theater companies and mainstream theater audiences, they don't want to talk about, So if we're talking about, queer Latinx peoples, that's not going to be involved in a Sondheim musical, right? But that's what a lot of theater goers want. They just want to be entertained, and that's all that they're there for. But with Breath of Fire, what we want to do is, sure, we'll entertain you, but there's also something behind it where you won't just be talking about just the costumes. You won't be talking about just the sets. There's going to be some kind of moral indication there of whatever it is that we're working on that we also want you to think about. So it's more so than just getting entertained and going to Disneyland and then going home and having a good time. There's got to be something deeper than that, right? There's got to be something more invested and more at stake. So for me, especially SoCal audiences, we're one of the only, if not the only, Latina theater-run companies in the area. And these are folks who we've all been trained in different ways, but we're really dedicated to what we do. We're really serious about it. It's our literal, blood, sweat, and tears that get immersed into anything that you see. It's our dedication, it's our heart, it's not just our hours, it's also who we are at our core. And so I think it's really important for theater goers to not just engage with these, shows that they've seen 30,000 times, right? And we see another version of it, there's so much more out there, and there's new artists that are always emerging and coming up, and we need to support them as well, because they're going to be the next people who are going to be writing our theatrical shows. And so small shows, underground shows, all of these type of shows are really important, because they're not just going to be prepackaged entertainment couple of hours for you. They're going to be something more. They're going to be something that you probably hadn't thought of before. Maybe you had thought of before, but it's in a way where we're able to tell it to you kind of in an uncensored way. And so that's really important to me. I think too, and I might be ranting here, but um, there are not a lot of opportunities for Latinx, Chicanx, Asian, Native American, Black performers, queer performers, such a range of performers, Afro Latinx, Native Latinx, this beautiful community and beautiful peoples who are struggling to find parts because we're always just the maid. We are the butt of the joke. We are just there, right? We're not the main characters. We're not telling our truths. It's just a caricature of who we are, whatever community that might be. And, if there is a casting, it's casting because it's for diversity. It's not because the person, they believe in them, right? But for us, we do the opposite. We believe in who it walks through our doors, right? We give folks a chance, whether they're at the beginning stages towards, or, more towards the professional stages. And it's almost like a mentorship as well. And so we go out of our way to find those folks. We go out of our way to find people who are not always represented, or are represented falsely or very offensively. And so that's another reason why this is so important, is because it's not just engaging in racist shows in historically racist manners in terms of casting and who's on the board and who's doing the tech. We try really hard to get other folks involved, and our audiences should be able to see that and see something else besides a white show run by white folks. And so, like, if you look, for example, like Hamilton, I know there's a lot of controversy around, and criticisms around the methodology and the way that people have responded to it. But if you look at the response by the main audiences and those actors who are like, why is there only one white part? That kind of frustration. We've experienced that frustration this whole time, and the more of the more individualistic identities that you're composed of. So like for myself, I'm a queer Latinx, Chicanx woman, two-spirited person, right? All of those, like, the white audiences are going to go, what's that? How do you deal with that? What do you do with that? And so that is a really important conversation that a lot of mainstream theater companies and theater audiences don't want to talk about. Because if you don't see it, if you're not engaged in it, if you don't understand it, and there's no willingness to understand it, then you're not going to care about it. You're just going there to be entertained. And so when you think about in mainstream theater, you think about these main characters, who they're being portrayed by. That's one of the reasons why we're here, is because we're not those main characters. We're not supposed to be in theater. We're not supposed to be involved in these artistic matters that make you think and make us think and make you think and engage in these intellectual conversations. So that's another reason too why it's important, is because you have to confront those things that you might or might not know are there, and we have to bring them to the surface. It's just something that has to be discussed. And, like I said, Hamilton really brought that out when you see the negative reactions of, oh my gosh, like the casting is racist, or something like that. And we're just sitting back going, no, actually it's not. But what you've engaged in, especially on a Broadway level, that's a form of kind of racist entanglement of artistic value. And so that's another reason why it's important for SoCal folks, is to dismantle those ideologies of kind of white patriarchal concepts that only certain people should be allowed on the stage. We completely disengage from that, and we allow whoever wants to be on stage. If you want to, or write something down, or do some form of tech, you're allowed to do so, because we're trying to make sure that we move as far away from those ideologies as possible. And again, that's one of the reasons why I moved away from where I was to where I am now. I'm more conscious. Back then I was just doing whatever I could get my hands on, but now that I have built myself up and really done the heavy lifting, literally and figuratively, I get to choose where I want to be. I get to choose where I want my art to be dedicated to, and my time to be dedicated to. So because of that, that's again, yeah, it's one of the reasons why I had to get out of where I was, because it was just a typical run of the mill white run theater that was for white folks, older white folks. I mean, well, I'll call it what it is. That's what it was. And even some people who were running the shows and were complaining and saying the same thing. It was run by people who were not invested in their art; they were invested in their paychecks. Someone once said, "Love the art, hate the business." That was very much where I was in my life, and now I'm kind of able to love both, because I'm able to be involved with these folks who are also have done kind of the same that I've done, and now are able to pick and choose where they want to be. And yeah, so it's so important, but a lot of people don't want to talk about it. And if you do bring it up, then you work on less shows, no matter how hard you work, because you're a nuisance now. You're causing a disruption in the flow of white patriarchal shows that you've seen over and over again, but for some reason people come flocking to it. And we've developed a really good audience. And yeah, I mean, mainstream theaters get to Mickey Mouse the show, whatever the show is. They literally get to just do whatever they want with it. And that's, I think, also one of the reasons why Sada and Diana wanted to have their own kind of organization, was because we do it in a way where it's still rich and engaged with what the writer originally envisioned, but just, tweak it every once in a while just to make it a better production, because they know it could be better. They know it could engage with the audience more thoroughly. It's not to change things because it's too controversial or it pushes it too far. If anything, we're always trying to push it a little too far and push the envelope so that it causes people to think. These type of events, like the stage stories, are important for our communities because they also feel like they could also get involved. They can also engage. Different people have different ways of doing that. Some people just are too shy to talk, and that's totally fine. Sometimes they just want to watch. That's perfectly okay. Other people want to jump in and see how they can help. Other people want to be participants. Other people want to be writers. And so it's important for our communities because they get to hear from people like them, right? People who are from the barrios, people who have struggled, people who have engaged with unique circumstances as they pertain to different communities that other communities may not know about, or they know about but have not experienced. And so for our community members who come and attend, again, this is not to just create shows and create events because we want to put on this Mickey Mouse show, right? These are real, raw things that we've experienced. And those are real, raw things that we want people to think about for themselves. And if they want to, in some way, engage in it in an artistic manner, then we're here to support them. And we're here to mentor them and help them. And so it's important for our community to hear from other people in their community and engage in conversations where we're talking with them. We're not talking to them. We're not talking about them. We are familia. We are, in a way, there's a connection that's to be had. And so with that connection, we are able to have more thorough, realistic, heartfelt conversations and real heartfelt reflections on our lives. That way, we can, again, get all these anxieties or these forms of depression or these forms of X, Y, and Z out and just have a solid conversation without feeling a wall that needs to be set up, because, again, you're getting talked to rather than talked with. And so that's important for our community, is to know that there are representations of who they are in a positive manner, in a non-stereotypical manner, in a non-offensive manner, and that they themselves can also flourish and thrive, and that whatever that they're going through, that they would be able to get through it. Well, the Southern community definitely should get involved with Breath of Fire because we're predominantly Latinx. We're people who are coming not that far away, just geographically. But we're going through so much, and we, a lot of folks may not feel like their stories again are being told. Their voices are being told for them, and not by people within their community, but by others who are making assumptions about them, or stereotypical oppressive caricatures of who they are. And so for our SoCal community, we know that there are a lot of theaters that are around. There are a lot of productions that are being made, but again, you have to ask yourself what those productions are, who are involved with those productions, who's being cast in those productions, and why are they being cast in those productions. So for our SoCal community, because we are actually diverse and not diverse, um, we want to invite you to come with us on whatever journey that we're going to take you on. We want you to talk to us. We want you to have connections with other people and have real conversations about whatever it is that you're going through, and be able to, like we were talking about therapeutic measures earlier, right? Develop forms of different therapeutic methods that are proper for you. And so for us, it's acting, it's writing, it's doing tech work, it's organizing and being involved with each other and leaning on each other and being able to be honest with each other, whether we're having a great day or a hard day or somewhere in between. That's what we want our SoCal community to have. We want them to be able to know that they are being positively represented, and that they can be involved and they can do the same thing with their own communities. They can engage in those conversations and provide art for not just art's sake, but for community's sake. We're very, very heavy on our community because for a lot of us, we went to college, right? We're because of that, we're in a different echelon, than those who might not have been. And not to say that we're necessarily better, but in the mainstream theater, community, that means that we kind of uphold something different than those in the community. But for us, we know that we're not any better from anyone in the community, college degree or not, educated or not, language, citizenship status, doesn't matter to us. You are allowed to come however you are, and know that we will engage with you and that we care about you. And your stories are very important. Your voices are important. Anything that you're going through, we want to hear it. We want to know the issues that you're dealing with, and we want to be able to help you develop positive methods to get through whatever you're getting through. So that's what we want for our SoCal community. I think, at least for myself, being involved with Breath of Fire and not having to be intimidated by theater, because theater has always historically just been predominantly white, and telling really fun stories or sometimes tragic stories, but everything has a happy ending, and there's no real depth to characters. Oftentimes it's just entertainment, but we want our SoCal audiences to know that there's something beyond entertainment that's out there for you. There are real stories that are being told, and there are real people who are doing it, and we want you to be able to do it as well. All voices need to be heard, because just as a historian, and not speaking just from a theatrical point of view, voices need to be heard because we get into this rabbit hole of accepting forms of oppression and forms of stereotypical ideologies that are not who we truly are, and we feel intimidated. We should not be allowed to feel intimidated. We shouldn't be forced to feel like we have to engage in the same stories that are not in our heart. They're not passionate for us. They're just entertaining. And so our voices need to be heard, because then we produce something like what the nation is going through right now, and we put certain people in power that are exhibiting these forms of extreme violences towards a multitude of communities, because it's under a capitalistic heteropatriarchal ideology where there needs to be a form of dominance, or there needs to be in the theater world, competition. Right? For us, competition is not important. We don't want to engage in that form of competition. It's not something that will be fruitful because we are more invested in hearing and educating ourselves and being willing to learn. We are very always, always, always learning every single day. We don't think that we know everything about everything, especially when it comes to art. Art is subjective, but we also want to make sure that those who are rejected, those who may not feel comfortable within mainstream theatrical companies, have a place where they can feel comfortable and really understand and dismantle why they feel uncomfortable, and then be able to engage in an artistic way methods that will allow them to feel comfortable with who they are and understand more so their identity and the hardships that they and their ancestors have gone through as well. So it's important for all voices to be heard, especially in artistic manner, because as we see, what you see in the museums, what you see in mainstream theater shows, what you see on TV are not us. And that needs to be definitely reversed, because then we get sucked into white patriarchy, we get sucked into white heteronormativity, we get sucked into these concepts that that is normal and anything outside of that is not normal and is not worthy of being listened to. That is completely false, and that's something that we're working on. So we have people from all walks of life, we have all ages, we have all identities. We try really hard to push to have as many people who feel comfortable in discovering who they are and are willing to learn involved in our work and in our spaces.